Hello everyone, Trent and Joey from Thearthland here, bringing you another tutorial. And by Trent and Joey, I just really mean Joey. Trent's just kind of here.
Yep, that's me.
So today I'm going to teach you guys how to make an explosion in Mine-imator. Now, so I've taken this little house that I've in Mine-imator in the village that the later half of Players vs NPCs took place, and it took some blocks off of the house. Now I'm going to use this to help me show you guys how to make an explosion. So, first of all, in an explosion, if you want something part of a scenery to explode, like if you've seen the Quaventures in Earthland Part 1, you've seen the part where Timmy the Courageous gets blown up, and then we get blown up, and all that jazz. So I'm going to show you guys how I do stuff like that in Mine-imator. So first things first, you take away whatever you want to explode. So you see I've already taken away all these blocks. So then, after you do that, you have to manually put, this is the most tedious part of making an explosion, is you have to manually put every single block right back into a spot as good as you can each time. So any comment on that, Trent?
Nope, looks pretty good to me.
Okay, I don't even know if you're watching. I'm just going to have to give you a benefit of the doubt and
Yeah,
assume
I
you're
see it.
watching. And
There's the cobblestone on the top. There's that nice hole through the corner. Looks like a villager house or something.
Yep. So I'm gonna speed this up when I'm putting all the blocks back, but I'm gonna go ahead and put all the blocks back. All right, here we go. All right, so now you'll notice that I am. Trent, sorry, just Trent messaged me. Yes, you may notice that Trent is now gone. He had to do a league game while I was doing that. And so, if you'll notice, I have put all of the blocks back onto the thing. Now, you will have to understand that it never will be perfect. It never will be. You can, I see, but nobody's going to notice your imperfections. Nobody's going to be more critical of it besides yourself. So, the important thing is just to make it get as close as possible. Ignore these just slight little alterations because they can barely be seen from most angles. So what needs to happen now is even in higher quality mode, it's even better because you barely notice them in the actual animation quality that it exports in. So now, when you have an explosion, you need to have a base block. So first of all, I'm gonna have this run for a little bit before we're gonna start with this one right here because it's the top one, or this one because it's the top one. So you need to have a base block, and we'll use that one. So first of all, I'm gonna have nothing happen for the first 30 frames. So that'll be the equivalent of waiting this long before the explosion. Now, what you have to do is, you have to figure out, this base block is what you're going to base all the rest of your blocks off of, because it's best if it's the most open block, if that is possible. And this one is the most open block. So what you're going to want to do is, you want to take the base block, And you want to figure out how high you want it to go, and that depends really on how big the explosion is. And this base block is also going to help you determine how big the actual explosion is. So, we're going to start with, since the explosions, they cause a lot of damage, so this is going to explode relatively fast. So, we're going to want to move it right around here. Now, I did this wrong. I should have angled it a little bit more like this, and now it goes up. So now explosion happens. That's too fast. You have to adjust accordingly to the amount of speed there is. So, and because of the way velocity in physics works, the most amount of time spent is going to be up in the air, because that's the least amount of velocity that the thing has. But it's going to go over, I'm probably going to have it go like over here. So right over here. Now it's not going to go in a straight line in physically, of course. It wouldn't actually go a straight line. It would raise up and do stuff like that. So that doesn't look right, though. So you need it to go on the plane that it was. Still not on the plane. So that's starting to look right. And make sure to add more spin on it as it's going along. Depending on if you want the block to spin, which I would recommend. And that doesn't look right at all. Now you want to simulate the speed as much as you can. So I've almost got it. The thing about explosions is it takes a lot of trial and error. That is definitely a thing with explosions, is you have to figure out what looks good and what doesn't look good. But I want to show you the general concept that is in it. So that looks fine. That looks fine. That does not look fine. That almost looks good. That is almost great. So, I'm actually going to make that speed up just a little bit. See? Now, it has one fluid motion of just going over there. It is now one fluid motion of spinning out of control and about to hit a block. So now, we finish the rest of this. We send it down to wherever it feels like it's going to land. And of course this takes a lot more trial and error as well. Alright, so now you have a basic explosion, or basic block exploding. You have just the whoop, sort of, it's mostly good. But I'm going to want this block to react a bit more to the environment and to spin a little more. So it's going to spin a little more, spin a little more, spin a little more, spin a little more, spin a little more. So now here's how it looks. It looks like it doesn't look good from that angle. It looks actually really bad from that angle. It didn't do that. Of course, like as I was saying, a lot of trial and error, guys. Alright, so we got a basic straight line. And I wanted to go through it frame by frame just to see how it spins. So you want the spin on the ball, or not the ball, the block as well. So it goes like that, and it should react more to the being thrust into the air than it did there. So now I do that, and then that means that needs to spin as well. And then that means that it needs to land quite spinningly. Alright, so now we've got a nice little arc here. We got a... And it doesn't have to look perfect again, but you want to make it look as good as possible. Because if it's an explosion, then you want it to look good. Or at least look good until it's out of frame. But yeah, usually things explode relatively faster than that. But since that's the longest block and it's going to have the most oomph to it, it's going to need that. So the explosion goes out in that direction. And so, now that we have the base block, we can adjust it to any other block that we have. But first, I forgot about something. You need to make sure, if you want to take the extra mile and go to detail, once the block hits an object, another block, anything, like this is hitting the edge right here, you have to make it react to it in any way you feel necessary to the situation. Alright, so there. Now we have the block doing this. Now that doesn't look perfect, but it looks pretty nice. Hold on. Alright, sorry this is taking so long, guys, but the explosions are a long and tedious process. And that's why, in all honesty, you don't want too many of them in your animations, because they are going to take up a lot of your time. But they look cool if you do them right. So now we have one block. And I'm only going to go through a couple more blocks. And then I'm going to show you the finished product after I'm done making the explosion. Alright, so with other blocks are going to react to different blocks, and different blocks have different perspectives on the explosion. Like this block right here, this block, because it's condensed within the other blocks, despite it's going to be part of the explosion, is only going to lift up a little bit. And I didn't even figure out where it was. Whoops. So now it's only going to raise up a little bit. It's going to go faster than that. A little slower. You want things to go fast enough that they go a certain speed, but at the same time don't look completely unrealistic, like right out of frame. You want to be able to see them. That's the convincing part of an explosion. You have to be able to see what each block does. Now this next part's important. Blocks like these, like stone block, whenever they explode, I just kind of want to make them stop, like that one. Like how that one just kind of stopped. But with smaller, lighter blocks, I like them, when they explode, I want them to bounce a little bit. So in terms of bouncing, you're going to want the ball to go, or not the ball, I keep saying ball, I don't know why. You're going to want the block to go back up in the air and just go back down a couple times. Alright, so now let's see how this looks. Alright, so that looks pretty good. A little fast, but we can't be perfect here. Now, we know that. No, physics, that doesn't look possible. Yeah, that looks much better. Now, that doesn't look perfect, and I know wood wouldn't actually bounce like that. In fact, that looks a little like that. How does that look? Alright, that looks much better. So now we have the bouncing block and this one. We have 2 blocks in the explosion. And I think I'm only going to go over 1 more block, then do all the rest of the blocks off camera because I don't want this animation to take an hour. Or this tutorial to take an hour. So we have this, we have these blocks going off. Perfect. Alright, so what's 1 more block? I did a middle block, Let's do a bottom block. Now the bottom block is going to get affected by the most because it is on the bottom. So what's probably going to happen is but usually the explosion will originate from the bottom, so we'll have to go at the same speed as the other ones. But with the middle one, it's not going to rise up very high. Now, which block is this one is the question. Block 11. Hello, Mr. Block 11. Now, you are going to, at the start of this, you're going to go out and just slightly up and just slightly askew. It all really depends how much space each block has. Now this block I've just made slide. So instead of bouncing, I just wanted to slide. Now that doesn't look quite right. It goes a little slow. But in terms of sliding, you gotta make it slow down. It can't just slide and just stop. So here's another tutorial. Sliding. It wants to slow down and come to not so much a stop perhaps, or not so much a instant stop, but a very slow down. Nah, that didn't slow down, that sped up. Alright, close enough. So, I'm going to turn off the recording. I am going to record, I'm going to do the rest of this off camera, and then I'll come back to you guys when I have the finished product and explain the rest of the parts that go into an explosion. Alright, see you in a second. Alright, and I'm back, and I have several of the blocks exploding off when not every single block explodes, but that's due to not every block's going to blow off during an actual explosion. So I decided, and to not take up so much more time on this situation. So as you can see, we now have several blocks blowing off when this explosion occurs. So here's what it looks like. There's no sound effects, of course, because that goes back into editing. But here's how it would look. I'm just going to say boom whenever there's about to be an explosion. Boom. So that's what's going to happen when it explodes. And if you take into consideration... Now let's look at this from a different angle. If you... Hold on. Okay, just want to make sure my mic was picking up. So if you take into consideration everything, it should... When it explodes, boom, like that. So... Each block each block is slightly different. That one, of course, the stone one, of course, bounces off. Some, of course you want to, if you look at the one to the left, to the very right, that bumps into the house and just goes back down. You want to make sure that that is an occurrence that happens. And you don't want all the blocks to stop at the same time, because each block is different, and each block will have their own set of physics. Like that stone one flew a lot further than the one since it had the most space to fly. Now, so Oh, I apologize for my dogs barking. So, when you have this, now that we have this scenario, there are several other things that go into explosions. As long as you follow the rules that I set before you for the blocks, your explosion should look pretty nice. So, if the explosion happens at night, I like to do, even during the day, but during the day you're not going to notice it as much. Though, of course, with the new shading engine, it does look... my dogs, I'm so sorry. The new shading engine looks makes it look a lot nicer. But in terms of the explosion, when the explosion is about to occur, you want to have a light just go off real quick. Also, I wanted to point out, when you're doing this, it may be a benefit to put all of the blocks in a folder if you have characters. But since I'm only doing a tutorial on how to do it, I'm going to keep all the blocks outside. So now I have a light, and I'm going to take this light, first frame, light, get over here, bring the light over here. Bring the light to just about the spot where the explosion would happen if that is the case, and then look at it from here. So I'm going to set the time to night, and so it's going to be very dark now. Let's just put the time a little bit lighter. There we go. So now we don't want the light on the whole time. So we make it invisible until the explosion. Now I make it visible right here, because then you can actually see it. Now, do I want it right here? Or do I want it? So if it goes like this, then boom. But don't want that. If you have the light adds to the effect of the explosion, but you don't want the light to just stay on. You want the light to go back to being invisible. You got it. That doesn't look right. So that is right, but it needs to start with the blocks because it's gonna make the explosion look nice. But it needs to only happen for a second, but then go down in actual lighting. Now maybe if I make it red. Okay. Get rid of the range and just sync the range down to minimal numbers. So like if you do this, it'll look a little better. Now we don't want it to go that fast, so like that. There we go. That looks normal. Like a normal explosion. So boom, like that. Now finally, if you want to add particles, which is a good new feature, I am honestly not the person to talk to about that, because I never use particles in my explosions because I just can't get them to work, and I apologize for that. So if you want to use particles, I'll try to figure out. If you really want to, put a link in, not a link, put a comment at the bottom of the video and tell me you want to learn how to do particles, and I will spend whatever the amount of time it takes to learn how to use particles in the explosion, But now, let's take one more good look at this explosion. So we have, boom, like that. So if you want to do an explosion, just follow the instructions, and hopefully you will learn. You will do it, and hopefully you learn. My dogs, and hopefully you learned a little bit from. And hopefully you learned a little bit from this about making an explosion. If not, I apologize, but hopefully it is. So thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day. Bye.